I think it was the role model, I think, of my father, seeing him push through adversity and the things he went through in his life. I think it's a little bit of my chemistry, to be honest. I mean, I feel lucky in that sense. And it's a little bit of, I don't want to live in a one-bedroom apartment and have to sleep on the couch the way my dad did when I grew up, so I could have the bedroom. And so I have I'm fighting for something there, and I want to make sure my kids, I want to make sure they got good educations and we're safe, and I could provide a home. And I don't need 5 homes, I don't need a private jet, but I want to provide security for them, and I want to provide opportunity for them and give them the opportunities that I didn't have.
Welcome to the Matthews Mentality Podcast. In this episode, we have the privilege of hosting Sean Burton, Chief Executive Officer of Cityview. Cityview is a real estate investment management and development firm that specializes in developing, acquiring, and operating opportunistic and value-add multifamily projects in gateway markets across the Western United States. Cityview was named the decade's largest multifamily developer in LA by Los Angeles Business Journal. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's been a busy decade.
A busy decade. We're going to talk through it. They are a multifamily development powerhouse with 5,200 apartments under management and over 1,500 units in development. Sean, I can't thank you enough for hosting me in your office in beautiful Century City, Los Angeles, my old stomping ground. And I will say, this is, no pun intended, this is a beautiful city view you have up here.
Thank you.
Was that meant?
That was on purpose.
That was on purpose. You see, I put that together. How's everything going?
Things are good. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to do this.
Like I said, I'm excited to have you, and a little multi-family red meat for the audience.
Good.
All right, what you working on right now?
So we're busy as ever. So Cityview is focused on, as you mentioned, multifamily. We are in the western half of the country. We have over 50 assets that we own and manage. All we do is multifamily, and that is both development and value add. And it's been a really busy, decade, really 20 years. I mean, we actually just had our 20-year anniversary of the firm last October. We've grown a lot from 3 employees. Now we have 160, and very, very active, but we're excited about the opportunity.
So developing multi in the Western U.S., specifically California, I'm not going to generalize here, but people have told me that can be challenging at times.
Yeah, it is challenging. But we think that's where the opportunity is. I mean, I was just having this conversation with somebody earlier today. California on any given day is the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world, trading places with Germany. And I like to remind my German friends, we have half as many people as they do.
That's
so
right.
We're twice as productive.
I just read today, Germany had a higher jobless report today than they thought, and California booming with the AI economy. We probably have passed them.
Yes.
But California is a huge.
It's a huge market, and the issue in California is we have a housing crisis because we don't build enough housing. We haven't built enough housing.
Remind me to ask you why you think that is.
Yeah, so
right?
I have lots of opinions on that.
I know, and they're very educated and valuable opinions. So I do want to ask you, because typically we really spend time diving into your journey and a lot of the psychology behind that, and we're going to, but that is a fascinating topic.
We'll talk a little bit of real estate too.
Okay, fair enough.
But so, at the end of the day, we think there's huge opportunity here. And because we're so active and have done so much, we feel that gives us competitive advantage. We're not only in California, we're in Seattle, we're in Denver, we're in Dallas, we're in a bunch of other markets as well. But California continues to be a big opportunity.
What do you find to be the biggest complication or the biggest challenge as a massive developer of multifamily in these markets?
I would say it's a couple different challenges. Right now it's interest rates and costs, and interest rates obviously has really impacted our industry.
Has it?
First time you're hearing that?
Oh man,
it's been, that's a big impact. Costs have continued to escalate. I mean, they've slowed quite a bit from an escalation from what they were last decade and even during COVID. But things are still expensive to build. And right now, why we do both value add and development is because it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a shovel in the ground today when you can buy something at 30, 40, 50% less than it costs to build it. So why would you put a shovel in the ground today? But we are in these markets that are incredibly supply constrained. So it's going to make sense to build there eventually.
This is a hard question for you to answer because every market's different. So I recognize that. For every dollar you spend developing a property, how much goes into the actual hard costs and materials to build it, and how much goes into the permitting, planning, and kind of paperwork of getting it there?
I mean, generally, we kind of are allocating 15 to 20% for soft costs, as we call them. Land is not a huge part of the pro forma in our business, unlike industrial and some other real estate, development classes. So it's the cost of permitting and entitlements and those kinds of things, but it's also the time that's really impactful, right? That's where I think developers get in trouble, is they don't understand all the steps that you need to go through to get something done. And in our business, time is money. And so the more expertise that I think a firm has in that, the more you can deliver on that. But you can't forget that.
And again, tough question, because every project, every market's different. But what would you say on average, if you got to answer the question, what is the average time from the moment you, let's say, put a deal under contract, a land site, and then when you're actually delivering the multifamily product to the market?
Yeah. So it depends on a couple things. One is, which market are we in, right? If I'm in Dallas doing that, it's much quicker than if I'm in San Francisco, for example. So that's a big driver. The second thing is whether or not the land is ready to build what we want to build on it. We find a lot of stuff is unentitled, under-entitled, entitled for the wrong thing. So a lot of what we do at Cityview is option land or buy land and then take it through a process to really maximize what's the highest and best use of the land. And that may not always be the most density. It may not be the tallest building, but what's most appropriate for the neighborhood, what aligns with costs and rents and everything else. And, on average, I would say when we're entitling something, that's a, 12 to 24 month process to get it ready to put a shovel in the ground. And
you said earlier, if it's Dallas, it might be quicker than San Francisco. Why is that?
It's just much harder in a lot of California markets to get things through. I mean, the layer of approvals is layers of approval are more dense, they're more complicated. We have a law here in California, the California Environmental Quality Act, which was passed in 1970, and it was intended. It's actually an interesting story. It was intended to only apply to government buildings. In fact, Ronald Reagan, when he was governor, signed it. It was based on a national law. And what happened is soon after that was signed, a developer up in Mammoth in the mountains decided they want to build some condos, and the neighbors didn't want condos. And so they sued under this California Environmental Quality Act. And everybody thought it was a bogus lawsuit because that only applied to state buildings. But it went to the California Supreme Court, and they reinterpreted it basically to say, well, any government and any building that needs government approval is considered a government building, basically. And so now it applies to everything. And that's what's really used to delay projects today. CEQA. Yeah.
How would I ask this question? What is your opinion on that?
I think it was well-intentioned. And I think obviously we have to have environmental protections for what we do. I think it's abused quite a bit. And it's used as a tool to slow or stop development, even if there's no real environmental impact. In fact, often when people sue under it, they don't sue and say, there's an environmental impact that's going to affect my community. They sue on a process ground and say, well, this person, only did 11 of the 12 reports that were required, or this report wasn't thorough enough. And so they try to overturn or delay
until you give up.
A lot of people give up, or it just becomes uneconomic. And what's happened now is a lot of investors will just choose not to invest in California because they don't want to take the risk.
Which then becomes the housing crisis.
Yes.
Which is the affordability crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, we're going to go through some of your experience in politics in D.C. I was going to say, I feel like these guys and gals. Like, are they going to listen to you? Come on.
Not enough.
I know, not enough. But I want to let's start going back to how you got in this, how you became the CEO of this big development company, very successful. But let's go back to the beginning. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in California, actually here in Los Angeles, and I was
You're one of those few natives. Me too. I was born in Northridge.
Okay. And I was born here and actually raised primarily in Isla Vista near UCSB in Santa Barbara.
That's a bad spot to have to grow up,
It was a great experience, and my dad was a writer. I was raised by a single father, and he was a writer, and he liked to be in university towns, and he would open a little kind of a hamburger restaurant where we were to pay the bills, and he opened a restaurant called the Hamburger Habit, which eventually became the Habit restaurant, which is not him. It was someone he sold it to who turned it into that.
I was going to say, when I was a starving broker early in my career working off Ventura Boulevard. The Habit had cheap barbecue burgers, but
Exactly. That was the idea. And so I grew up, living with him in an apartment and working, waiting tables and
was the original
doing
free
dishes.
was the original Freebirds up there yet?
Not yet.
Got
No.
it. Yeah, it was like I remember I used to go up to visit some of my buddies at UCSB, and they had the house, the rental house on the cliff, and
Yeah,
I live
sure.
I live
IV, yeah.
IV,
Yeah.
and Freebirds was open until like 4 a.m. You get $5 burritos. I loved
Yeah.
it. It was great.
Yeah, it was a great place to grow up, and so it was a great experience. And what I liked about growing up in Santa Barbara is you didn't come out of there overly sophisticated in the bad sense of the word. Like life was pretty simple, and it was a nice place to grow up.
And so, talk to me to the best of your abilities. Kind of self-describing who you were as a kid. What were you like as a kid, or how would people describe you?
It's an interesting question. I think I was curious. I was energetic. I was always doing something. I always had a lot of activities. And I was just busy. I mean, I always had to work in the restaurant most days, and that prevented me from doing things like travel sports and those kinds of things. That didn't exist.
Well, I was going to
as
ask
much, yeah.
baseball. We'll talk is a big chunk of your life as a father, being
Yeah.
a baseball dad, and your son very
Yeah.
successful playing in college. Did you play baseball growing up, or?
I played baseball up until high school. I was never nearly as good as my son was,
Yeah.
Which still bothers me. But yeah, I played baseball. I played tennis. I played high school football. But those were the days when you could do that, right? You could play multiple sports. You didn't have to specialize. You didn't have coaches, like special coaches.
Yeah, private coaching. Yeah, the specialist, culture is very different than I grew up playing 4 or 5 sports, and by the end of high school, you pick your one or two. But
Right.
What about as a student?
So I was a good student.
Define good.
I got A's and B's, and I was curious. I particularly liked history and government and kind of the humanities, which is interesting. I ended up in a math field in real estate, but yeah, I always liked school because my dad was a writer. I was always raised with a lot of books around the house. He was always reading 5 or 6 books at a time, and so I was a big reader. Which obviously helped in school and has continued to be a lifelong passion of mine.
What type of books did your dad focus on writing?
So he wrote all fiction books. He wrote, I would say that they weren't political thrillers or mysteries. They were more kind of what would be a drama today. He liked Hemingway was his favorite author, and he actually developed a relationship with Hemingway. He was much older than my dad. Than most fathers, and he had become a kind of a pen pal of Hemingway in the 50s. And
cool.
when he passed away, he left me these letters that I still have between him and Hemingway, which is pretty amazing. So that's the kind of things that he wrote.
Me and my closest buddies sometimes will do boys trips, and it seems like no matter where we went, Hemingway was there, and there's a statue. It's so weird.
Yeah.
We did Running of the Bulls. Hemingway was big in Pamplona.
Sure.
Then you go to Key West with the kids. Hemingway was down there.
Yeah.
We went to my wife and I. We're at a bar in Paris. It's the Hemingway bar.
Right,
so
sure.
yeah, that guy was the most interesting man in the world for a while.
Yeah.
Very cool. We no brothers or sisters?
I have older kind of half brother
Got it.
and 2 half sisters. Yeah.
Because I was gonna say, like, I'm trying to. What are the years dating you here? Is this 80s? Growing up in the 80s?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 80s in Santa Barbara, let's call it. Divorce wasn't as common as it is now. Like, how was that growing up? Were you? I'm clichéing, but were you one of the only kids who didn't have both parents in the house at the time?
Yeah, it wasn't as I would say as common as it was today, and
I feel like it was more of a stigma back then associated with that.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And we also, my dad, although he was a writer and had this restaurant, we never really had much money, so we never had a house. It was everybody else always had a house and a yard and a pool and
some beautiful homes up there.
Yeah, some beautiful homes, and we always had a 1-bedroom apartment, which was fine. But it didn't, it didn't.
Well, I was going to ask, like, what if any effect do you think that had on you as a kid, and jumping all the way to today? Like, is that a driver for you?
I think I think it is a driver for me. I mean, I watch my dad work very hard because he had to run a restaurant, which is a tough business, by himself. Plus, he would do his writing. Plus, he would raise me, and so he kind of didn't do much. He had no other hobbies other than kind of doing all of those things. So I grew up with that sort of work ethic, and it made me want to be successful, and not just in terms of how much money can I make, but really to create security, for my family, and that's been a big part of, I think, a driver for me, and I think it was a huge part of my character development and outlook.
Did it ever, as a kid, kind of wear on you though? Was there ever a moment where you like, woe is me or victim mentality and things?
Yeah,
like
it's interesting. It did wear on me. I remember I often couldn't do things other kids wanted to do. Like there would be a school trip, a ski trip somewhere, and they'd say, "Oh, we're going to put everybody on a bus and we're going to go to Mammoth for the weekend for the public high school." And like I couldn't afford to go, and we just didn't have the money. And so I would get angry and say, "Why are we poor?" And then he would tell me, "Well, I grew up in Rockford, Illinois during the Depression, and let me tell you what poor is. That's when you don't have meals on the table and those kinds of things." So it was tough. And then he actually passed away when I was in high school.
Oh, geez. How old were you?
15. Yeah.
So at 15, and forgive me not knowing this process, your dad passed away, your mom's not in your life. What happens?
So actually, I was very lucky that a friend of mine from high school, who I played high school football with, his family took me in, and they gave me I shared a room with him for my last couple of years of high school, and was able to stay off the streets and stay out of trouble, and so I was very fortunate that I had someone like that.
Yeah, that's very noble and very kind of them to do. Are you still close with them?
Yeah, I still see them, and it's the Caesar family, and they're in Santa Barbara still, and
that's nice.
And I was very, very fortunate.
Were you, as a high school in Santa Barbara, and maybe part of this may be driven by what was going on at home, but were you ever, how do you say, like on the edge of becoming getting in trouble or becoming a knucklehead, or a kid who kind of loses their way a bit?
I was, we definitely, we had a few keg parties in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, Santa Barbara.
Exactly.
Why do you think I went up there in college?
Exactly. That's what we did. We didn't get in really more trouble than that. Yeah. But I always had to have a job. I got my first job outside of my dad's restaurant when I was 13, and I worked at McDonald's in Santa Barbara. And
this wasn't when they're paying $30 an hour.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
They are now,
I wish that I'd be rich if I could have today's minimum wage. But I was so young that I had to go get a work permit from the state that said I couldn't work past 7 p.m. at nights, and I literally have had a job ever since then for another 35 years or whatever it's been. So
fast forward, I'm going to ask you: did you make your kids get jobs?
What's interesting. We did make our kids get jobs, but it was hard with the sports.
I was going to say,
right?
Travel sports is a job. I just was having this conversation the other day where I said it's hard for kids to have jobs because being a kid is a full-time job. First of all, I feel like, especially in a certain type of school, like the amount of workload they're giving kids, I know it's more than I ever had, right? And then, but the sports is a serious commitment if you want to excel because of the specialization. But
and I just my son, for example, it was very hard. For him to have a job because he couldn't commit. He had 6 days a week of baseball and was traveling in high school, and he worked and played in college, and so now he's got a job and he's making up for it. But my daughter always had jobs when she wasn't in sports.
And all right, so good student in high school. You go to college?
Yeah, good student in high school. Obviously thrown a loop when my father passed away. I ended up going to college. I went to UC Irvine. Which was great. It was $502 a quarter was the tuition to get a University of California education. And since I was paying for myself, that was a big deal. Yeah. And I went to college, and it was a great experience. I majored in social ecology, which doesn't sound like a real major, but it is. It was a combination of political science and environmental analysis and sociology and a bunch of different social sciences, and that was great. And I did that and lived on my own. I had skipped a grade when I was younger. I had skipped 6th grade, so I actually started college right after my 17th birthday.
Why did you skip a grade?
It just moved me ahead in the school system. So I went from 5th grade right to middle school.
They said this kid's a prodigy. We got to move him up.
I don't know about that, but I think I was maybe bored in my classes, and so they decided to move me ahead. By the way, it's not something they do anymore because they've realized that socially it can be a real challenge.
You beat me to the question. I got to be a better host. I was going to say, so my understanding, is that is very hard on the kid because, first of all, and I'm not saying this was you. Often, if they're suggesting they're moving your head, you're brilliant, you're smart, and you're very studious. And less so now with bullying, not being nearly as prevalent as maybe you and I grown up. Back then, a lot of these kids that are moving up, it's like, socially in school it could be tough because they could be labeled a nerd or something like that, a geek or whatever the words were they used back in the day. But then you're also physically and mentally and emotionally just a year younger. And so how was that on you?
Look, it was tough. I mean, you're a year younger, you're smaller, you're a year less athletic than you would be otherwise. It's not something I would do for my kids or even consider doing for my kids at the time. Now, look, it did force me to compete and to grow up faster, and I think that helped me as I took on challenges later in life. I had confidence that you could throw me in a situation and I could figure it out. So it ended up, I think, being a positive, but it's not something that we ever considered for our kids.
There's a great book, and you said earlier you're a big reader. You ever read Malcolm Gladwell's David versus Goliath?
I haven't read that.
It's a fantastic book, and I'm gonna butcher. I know what my takeaway was, but there's this saying is like, it was like David versus Goliath, right? And kind of as a analogy to explain someone overcoming odds to do something that you wouldn't think they could do, right? David beat Goliath, but he starts the book by actually explaining why, just in a pure combat standpoint, David having a projectile versus Goliath, a sword, like a projectile fighter is always going to win. Right. And so he actually he goes through all these stories of highly successful people, incredible achievers, and so many of them have disabilities or they have tremendous adversity they faced, and how what on the surface appears to be a weakness actually is what either created or drove them to develop their greatest strength that led to all this success. And so I'm thinking of you. You're raised in a single parent home at a time that that wasn't as common, and then you're moved up a grade, and then your dad passes away at 15. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of adversity, and growing up poor, in an area that probably had decent wealth. Have you ever stopped and looked back and said, "Wow, that was like I've had to overcome a lot"?
I mean, I have, but I see the benefits now. I know that sounds like a funny thing to say, but it really gave me my drive, and it gave me again the confidence to try new things, to take risks, to know I was going to be okay, because it's never going to be as bad as it was then, in a sense. So you kind of feel like you got the wind at your back, and maybe you've hit the lottery.
Gives you a lot of perspective, right? Yeah. I know that's that word's thrown around a lot, but it really does.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you say it that way, because I think I don't sweat the small stuff, and I'm fairly even keel as a person. I think that's because of the background that I have. And,
we're going to go through your career arc, but is it safe to say that's probably been one of the, not only your strengths and attributes that made you successful and into the professional person you are today, but also probably something people who've worked with you over the years has enjoyed, that you don't sweat the small stuff?
I think it's been a value add, and I think we have a culture here at the firm of you kind of attract similar people, right? People that aren't going to get too emotional about it. They're going to focus on the bigger picture, and I think that's part of the part of where we've ended up, because I think of that background to some degree.
I touched on this earlier. I think this is just my opinion. It is one of the biggest reasons people don't get to where they want to go, or the greatest handicaps they face. Even though in a way it's self-imposed, is what I call victim mentality, kind of feeling like something is being done to them and they're not in control, and it's kind of like this hopelessness that, why me? And so I asked you earlier, as it related to being a single parent household, but just in lining up the adversity you faced, before you even got to school in your first 18 years, was there ever a period of time where you kind of like maybe got close to a mindset of like, life isn't fair, and woe is me, and I don't even know why I would try, because like I've just had a lot of bad things happen to me, so I'm not gonna.
So not really, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that.
But you follow my question?
I do, and I didn't. That's not who I am, and it's for a couple reasons. One is, I was born with positive brain chemistry. I've just hit the jackpot on that I'm an optimist and see the best. Two, the lessons of my father, who grew up working in a factory during the Depression in Rockford, Illinois, which is a tough place, who was a bombardier in World War II, who had these real kind of frightening life experiences and adversity. So, I grew up in Santa Barbara, and yes, I wasn't the wealthiest kid, but I never had to worry about a meal. I never starved, right? My life wasn't in danger. So, I've been blessed with an outlook of not feeling sorry for myself and seeing things as an opportunity, and I feel lucky for that.
Full disclosure, I assume your kids complained. They're kids. Did you ever just pull out all these cards like, let me tell you when I was a kid?
Yes, I had to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow.
It's like your dad saying, I'll show you poor. You're like, hey, let me tell you.
Yeah. I'm sure I did. I probably blocked it out. I will say that, I'm lucky that neither of my kids are complainers or whiners. And part of that's because my wife is doesn't accept that either. And so I think we're all lucky in that sense.
All right. No complaining, no whining. Yeah. Not a victim. So you go to school, you go to college. How'd you do in college?
So I did really well in college. Yeah, I really kind of hit my stride in college. The first year and a half, I didn't do very well. I was 17. I was, frankly,
You're still developing.
I was still developing. My brain was developing. I was distracted at college, and then really in about the spring of my sophomore year, I woke up and I said, I'm really wasting my opportunity here.
Was it literal? You just woke up one day and said,
what's interesting is I had a girlfriend in college who was a great student, and I started dating her in my sophomore year, and we started to study together for classes. And I said, I can do this. Like if I actually go to class and I actually study, things happen.
Amazing how that works.
Amazing how that works, and that's where I kind of learned the first principle of I think it's been said that kind of 90% of life is showing up right at the end of the day, and so I kind of learned, let me show up, let me participate, let me engage. And so then I became a straight A student from that point forward. But it really took that kind of shift in the middle of my sophomore year to do that.
And your major was social ecology?
Yeah, social ecology with a minor in global peace and conflict studies. That's a lot of kind of international relations.
I was going to ask how you ended up in D.C., but there you go. There's the tell. Yeah. Straight A's. What did you go immediately from, and I'm looking as you went to school, to law school. Was that something that immediately happened after, or was there time in between you did something?
So I ended up working in the Clinton White House right out of college. And
what year was this?
That was 93.
93, okay.
94. So at the very beginning.
Yeah, he just got elected.
Yeah, it was very beginning of administration. I heard him speak when I was in college. He was in Orange County, and he was governor of Arkansas at the time, and I was really just blown away by him. He was unbelievably charismatic. What he said made a lot of sense to me at the time. And
do you remember what he said? Like paraphrase?
I do actually. He talked about that the job of government was to make people's lives better. Like the only test at the end of 4 years is, are people's lives better than they were before, right? And
wasn't that Reagan who said that when he beat Carter? He said, are you better off than you were
4 years ago? You better off 4 years than you were today. And what Clinton said, that's the only test. And so he said, but our job in government is not to create equal outcomes. Our job is to create equal opportunity. But if you create equal opportunity, people have to take responsibility for their actions.
If he said that today, I don't know if he gets elected.
Exactly. He wouldn't get nominated to either party.
No, the culture's changed.
But it was a really interesting take because at the time, Democrats didn't talk as much about creating opportunity, and they also didn't talk about the word responsibility. And I was really taken with him. And he was young. He was in his early 40s and
super
energetic.
Charismatic.
And it was kind of a changing of the guard post-Cold War in the country, and exciting time for America. So I ended up kind of volunteering for the campaign in Orange County and ended up getting hired into the White House once the president was elected.
Were you politically, did you have a political bent before that? Even as a high schooler, or was it just you said, hey, I'll go listen to this guy?
So I didn't have a political bent, but my father was a lifelong kind of bleeding heart liberal Democrat, but he had worked for Ronald Reagan, which doesn't make any sense, right? Because Reagan was from a small town not too far where he grew up in Illinois, and he worked for Reagan in the 1960s, right before he was governor, and said he was like one of the most decent human beings he'd ever met, with great values. And so in my house, we were always talking about history and politics. And so I kind of grew up, hearing about it and thinking about it. And then when I heard Bill Clinton speak, it was one of those moments, it's almost cliche to say it, like changed my life.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to go try this. And I was a kid who, had never been to the East Coast and had never flown that far, and ended up kind of getting this job in Washington in the White House at 21 years old. In fact, when they called to offer me the job, it was interesting. It was spring of 23. Clinton had been in office for 6 or 8 weeks. And somebody I had met said, interested in having you start for this job. I don't know if you've heard, but you did your thesis on healthcare reform in college, and president's asked his wife to chair a healthcare task force to kind of remake the healthcare system. Are you interested? And staff assistant job, doesn't pay much. I think it was $16,000 a year. And I said, of course I'm interested. And I said, look, I graduate in June. I'll be out there July 1. And the guy said, look, job starts on Monday. Like, if you're interested, I can't wait to hold it for you. And this was March. So I said, give me 24 hours. So I went and drove and went to see all my professors. And I said, would you allow me to, this is before Zoom, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Would you allow me to kind of do my papers remotely, and I'll fly home and take my finals? And because I have this opportunity to go work in the White House. And everyone said, absolutely. So I literally packed my little Celica, Toyota Celica with no third gear manual, and I threw all my stuff in the back, and I drove across country in 2.5 days.
The car made it?
The car made it barely.
Cool.
I left it there. I never made it past there.
So you were there for a year?
I was there for a year and a half. Yeah, I was there for a year.
What'd you work on? I mean, healthcare, but...
Yeah, I worked on healthcare. It was interesting. I was there the first week, and I met the president the first week. And even though I'd worked in the campaign, I'd never met him in person before. It was incredible. I mean, he was...
Walk me through play-by-play.
He held, there was something called the War Room, where they would respond to all the attacks on kind of the healthcare task force. And he came in and spoke to us on the first day, and gave a speech about how we were changing the world, right, which we believed at the time, and how very few people in history have the benefit of knowing they're changing the world as they're actually changing it. And he really inspired us, and we were excited. And then he went and thanked everybody. I got to shake his hand, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to meet him in person.
I have, and he'll remember it.
Yeah, I mean, he looks you in the eye, and he gives you this big kind of focus, and it's overwhelming. And it was incredible. And I was so excited. And I worked there the whole first week, and I had like $800 on my credit card, so I'd rented a little apartment in Virginia, and they called me in on Friday and said, how was the first week? I said, it was great. And they said, well, we love the work you're doing. I said, the problem is, we had this package before Congress. It was supposed to get approved. It didn't. So we can't pay you for a little while. So why don't you call your parents and have them wire you some money? And I said, well, it's not, I don't have that situation. And they said, well, look, we'd love for you to stay, and we'll get you a paid position, but we can't pay you right now. So I took the metro home, and I got off at Pentagon City Mall, and I walked out, and there was a Ruby Tuesday restaurant, which is like a TGI Fridays type place. And they were hiring and I waited tables and bartended in college. And so I went in and I applied for the job, and I said, look, I can work, but I just can't start till 5:30 every night because I have a day job. And they said, great. And so for 4 months, I would get up in the morning. We'd have a staff meeting at like 7:30 in the morning at the White House, and I'd be in my suit. And then at about 5 o'clock, I'd get on the metro, and I'd change into my little Ruby Tuesdays tuxedo on the way there, and I'd wait tables till 11:30 at night. And then I'd come home after that, and I'd work on my papers for college. And I did that for 4 months. They finally found me a job. I graduated in June, and they found me a job in the beginning of August, but a paying job. But it was quite the experience.
Did you ever think, where's my work-life balance?
No, I didn't. We didn't know what that phrase was back then in 1993.
Zach, what's this 27, 28 episode? We are like 28 for 28 on that coming up. I mean, I'm telling you, I could have probably guessed this, but everybody who sits in your chair is highly accomplished, and there's emotional intelligence off the charts, actual intelligence. There's good breaks and good luck, but man, the common theme is people who do great things, professionally speaking, they work their ass off. Yeah. I mean, and especially when they're getting going in their career, which as a real estate guy, this wasn't per se the industry you end up in, but like it is your professional development.
Sure.
You're working oh gosh, I can't even do that math. 17, 18 hours a day, like all told, from 7 in the morning to 5, then 6 to 11:30.
Yeah. I mean, if I got 5 hours sleep, it was a great night.
I was going to say, and that's not even counting, it's not defined as work, the work you're doing in college.
Yeah. And sometimes after the restaurant, we'd go out and throw darts at a local bar. That was fun too.
So what do you say? Oh gosh, you got to keep in mind everyone who's looking into your office right now, they're going to listen to this. So you got to think about how you want to answer this. Well, what do you think when like one of your employees like, but Mr. Burton, like, I'm working real hard, but my work-life balance, you just, okay.
Yeah, I don't hear that much. I don't know. I think that's filtered out before it gets to me.
That's true.
I think you got to lead by example, right? Yeah. I mean, I think if people, if the people who work for you sense that you're not all in, that's going to be the kind of firm that you have. If they sense you are all in, and look, we're very encouraging with families, and we're going to talk about family in a moment. I spent a lot of time with my kids as they were growing up, and but I remember I learned this as a young lawyer. I was at a big law firm, and the hours were very, very long. And I remember one of the partners who was very senior and very accomplished told me, I asked him, we went to lunch, and I said, I'm interested to know how you balance everything. And he said, look, it's great. He said, I have dinner with my kids every night. He's like, and then I'm back at the office at 8:30, finishing my work. So that was how he did it. And so I think you can do it. It's just, look, I put my golf clubs away for 20 years while I was raising my kids, and I don't have any regrets about that.
How's your game now?
It's pretty good now.
Oh, so, all right. There you go.
Now I'm an empty nester.
We have literally hundreds of young men and women who are starting their career in real estate because that's my industry, and and we coach them up. It's like, hey, brokerage. I'm not saying this is the only path, but one way to increase, if not sure, probability of success is you're working 14, 15 hours a day. 5 days a week plus you come in Saturday, and they're kind of like, what? You're like, yeah, this is how it is. And it's for many of them, it's like the first time they've heard that in their life. And so, there's a coaching and education process there, and some people don't accept that. And they're like, well, this isn't for me, and that's cool. And then some, you're like, okay. Yeah. And I said, if you're working 15 hours a day, 20 years from now, you did something wrong.
Right.
But, and this was how I got to where I'm going. This was my understanding. But every time I interview someone like you, Sean, it's the same thing. It's like, it is a total maniacal commitment to work early on.
Yeah.
And so credit to all of you guys.
And it doesn't have to be drudgery. That's what I try to explain to young people. I think too often there's this narrative in society that, you shouldn't get any pleasure out of your job. It's all about maximizing your, self-expression and your free time and your social media. And that's, you should do that too. But when young people come to me and want to have coffee and talk about their careers, I really encourage people to do something they're passionate about. And I know that can sound cliche, but the only way that I can put in the kind of amount of energy and drive into my job and my career and my company is because I love what I do. Doesn't mean there's not tough days. Doesn't mean I wouldn't rather be, hanging out with my wife and kids having dinner. But it's not a choice of between drudgery or your private life. You can make work really interesting, and that's why I really encourage people to focus on what you really like to do and spend time finding your passion.
Yeah, I always say I don't love everything that I do, but I love what I do, and those aren't mutually exclusive things. So it's actually a good segue to this question I wanted to ask. You're working at Ruby Tuesday. You're working at the White House. You're working on your college papers. What was driving you at that time? What voice in your head? What was it saying to you as to that was creating the energy and the commitment necessary to do that? What was it like? Okay, I'm going to do this, but this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah. So it's going to sound funny, but I thought that we were changing the world, and I was a part of changing the world, and I was going to do my piece.
Bill Clinton's a great salesman.
Yeah, he is. Well, look, and frankly, as a kid who grew up with not much, right? Thank God I didn't need expensive health care when I broke my arm playing high school football, or when my dad got cancer, right? And it didn't bankrupt the family because he was able to. He was on Medicare at the time. Thank God there were Pell Grants, which so I could go to college. Otherwise, I couldn't afford even the $500 of tuition a quarter. So I really felt like we were changing the world, and everything I did was in that vein. Like the reason I was working at Ruby Tuesday was so I could pay my rent, so I could work at the White House. The reason I was getting my college degree is because then I would be more valuable and more competitive and be able to do more things. So that was really the focus. And frankly, it's why I decided to go to law school, because as I was exposed to a lot of people that worked in government administration, the people that really moved the needle there were not necessarily the people that were lifetime employees. They were good, hard civil servants and hard workers as well. But the people that were really driving changes and driving policy making things happen were people who had worked in the private sector as business people, as lawyers, as doctors, and they developed a perspective and they developed a set of skills, and then they stepped out of that to give that back to public service. Yeah, and that's been my model.
So they almost had like a rationality that a lifelong civil servant or politician, no disrespect, it's just like they've spent their whole life in government, a practicality of what do they want to change and how can it actually be implemented in real life? Because it's not that the government's not real life or being a politician is not real life, but no, the actual private enterprise.
It's a different set of skills. And by the way, a lot of the career government people I met worked really hard and they're passionate about what they did and they do it for very little money. And so I have a lot of respect for that. But what I found was like trying to change something as complicated as the healthcare system, you needed to bring outside ideas, outside perspective, or willing to kind of break aids. I mean, no one used the word disruptor then, but it was disrupting. And so I said, I want to go work in the private sector, build a bunch of these skills. And by the way, I do want to earn a little bit of money because I don't want to live in a one-bedroom apartment my whole life. I want to have a house one day and maybe a backyard. And so I made the decision that after a year and a half, I would leave government, and law school was the kind of natural path for me.
So let's talk about law school. You apply to a bunch of schools. You apply to one school. How'd you end up at NYU?
So it's interesting. I applied to a bunch of schools. Remember, I'm putting myself through school, and law school is very expensive. And my grades, as I mentioned, were pretty good in college once I got my act together. And so I get into some good schools. But I plan to go to University of Virginia. And the reason I do that is because I live in Virginia while I'm working in Washington. I can get in-state tuition. It's a wonderful...
Charlottesville's gorgeous.
Charlottesville's gorgeous. Yeah. Bobby Kennedy went to university, to UVA. And so I actually end up enrolling there. And I move all my stuff down there in June, and I'm going to start in August. And I'm on my last trip I was at the time, I'd been transferred over to Vice President Gore's office, and I was traveling with him, and I was coming back on Air Force Two, and I called my roommate from the phone just because I thought it was really cool to make a call.
That
from a
is
plane.
Cool. Yeah.
And probably an abuse of government resources to spend that money.
I think there's I think there's bigger.
Let's strike that from the podcast.
No, I think there's bigger. I think there's bigger abuses in the government than you doing a call back then.
And my roommate calls me. I call my roommate, and he says, "Hey, you got this letter from NYU at law school." I open it up, and it says, "Oh, you've been admitted off the wait list." And I said, "Oh, that's that doesn't matter. It's the most expensive law school in the country. I could never go there." And especially when I got this great deal at UVA. But anyway, I get back to DC, and I had a couple extra days, so I called the dean's office up at NYU, and I said, "Hey, a prospective student would love to get a tour." And they said, "Okay, we'll come up and take the train up. We'll give you a tour of the law school." And it's a good excuse to go to New York. And I show up there, and the dean of the law school walks out to greet me, which didn't make a lot of sense. And he introduced himself to me, and he said, "Can I give you a tour?" So for the next 2 hours, he gives me a tour of the law school. And by the end of it, in the middle of New York and Washington Square Park, and he talks about all the great things that NYU is doing, I'm sold. And he sits me down, and he says, "What do you say? Do you want to come?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to come, but it's really expensive." And he said, and I said, "I'm putting myself through school." And he said, "How expensive?" Much more. And I said, "I don't know, it's $12,000 a year more." And he said, "If I give you a scholarship for $12,000 a year, will you come, to NYU?" And I, being an aspiring lawyer, I say, put it in writing.
Yeah.
And he gets up and he leaves the room, and I think I've offended him. And then he comes back in, and he sits down, and he's talking to me. And I asked him, I said, "Dean, let me ask you a question. Why did you take an interest in me? I'm just a kid from UC Irvine." And he said 2 reasons. He said, one, I've looked at your background, and I realized that, I have a lot of kids here who went to Yale or Harvard or Princeton and boarding school. He said, "You've had to scratch and claw and fight to be sitting in this office. So I know you're going to do something important in life." And the second reason he said, "I read your essay." He said, "I lost my father in high school, I know how hard it is, and I thought you could use a break. And so as his assistant walks in with a letter with a $12,000 a year scholarship, I sign it on the spot, and the whole direction of my life changes at that moment.
How the hell did you get your stuff from Charlottesville up
Yeah,
there?
exactly. Yeah. The guy who helped me move it in was not happy.
He's like,
with it
come
moving
on.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
It was incredible.
What was the dean's name again?
John Sexton.
And is he still around? Like, do you stay close to him?
He actually became president of the whole university. And now he's a professor there. Yeah. And I haven't talked to him in a number of years. But
Come on. I'm not telling you how to live your life. You got to reach out to him.
I know. That's what I do have to reach out to him. And look, not only to change the whole direction of my life professionally, but the first week of law school, I meet my wife. I'm assigned to argue against her.
I was good. Come on. You're taking all my questions. Like, what happened? Right.
Yeah.
So, I want to get to meet your wife because I think that's hilarious. That's so good. And I have to know who won the argument. But, and so, but
I will tell you that I won the argument, but it's the last one.
It's the last one.
So, yeah.
And it's only because
since.
It's only because she let you. That's so cool. What a incredible moment. And, it's like, is it fate? I don't know. But how awesome is that? A dean walks out and happens to have a shared experience with you. And I don't know.
Took a chance on me.
Yeah, took a chance.
Took a big chance.
Because you didn't have that kind of blue blood Ivy League, box check. If the kid doesn't do well in school, you're like, well, checked all the boxes,
Right.
That's very cool.
Yeah. No,
all right. So I do want to hear about law school, but you got to talk to me how you met your wife.
Yeah. So we were in the same section. There were 4 sections, and she would tell the story that that I came into the section as 100 people or so, and she was sitting in the back, and she watched me as I introduced myself to everybody and was working the room. I don't remember it that way, but that's her claim. And then
well, come on. I mean, you've been around Bill Clinton. You're from DC. Like, you're a politician at this point. Let's not kid ourselves. Like, you learned from the best.
Yes, I did learn from the best. There you go. He was impressive.
So I'm inclined to believe your wife's version of the story, but go ahead.
Yes. And so, so we were in, there was a smaller section where they were teaching us how to argue publicly, and we got assigned opposite sides of this argument on some sort of construction defect case. I guess it had to do with real estate. And as I always say, like, it's a good example of our marriage is we didn't necessarily agree on everything, but we respected each other's opinion. And so we had the argument and went through it. And then that night there was a law school mixer at a place called the No-Tell Motel Bar. I like to tell people she picked me up at a motel, and she came over and we talked, and the rest is history.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we just had our 25-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's very cool. Is there a specific emphasis of law that you thought you were going to focus on, as well as, I asked you to answer the question for your wife as well as your wife?
Yeah. So she went to NYU to be a public interest lawyer.
Okay.
John Sexton, as I mentioned earlier, was incredibly gifted, not only in terms of how smart he was, he clerked for the Supreme Court, but he was also very innovative and really took NYU Law School to make it one of the top 3 or 4 law schools in the country by doing interesting things. And he realized he was losing a lot of kids to Harvard and Yale and Stanford. So he said, let me create a program where I'm going to create 10 scholarships a year, full ride, most expensive law school in the country, all your living expenses paid.
Which is really expensive in New York.
Really expensive in New York for students who want to do public interest law. And if they agree they'll do public interest law, give a moral commitment to do it 10 years after they leave, we will give them this full ride. And I'm going to steal kids from Harvard and Yale and Stanford.
So let's not assume the audience knows what public interest law is.
Yeah, public interest law would be not working in the private sector for a law firm or a company, but working as a public defender, or working for a nonprofit or environmental lawyer, something to benefit the good, where you're not going to make a lot of money, but you're going to kind of do good.
But a lot of the go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so she actually was on her way to Harvard Law School, and when she got the scholarship, decided to come. And her class, by the way, is incredible. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries, who's the Speaker of the House, he was a Root Tilden scholar in her class. Anthony Fox, who is Secretary of Transportation and Mayor of Charlotte, was in her class. I mean, he really did pull a lot of the best and the brightest out of the country. And so that's what she intended to do. And then I wanted to be a corporate lawyer.
A suit.
So,
exactly. Yeah, because a lot of the reason you got to make money as an attorney is to pay off law school. So if you're getting a full scholarship, perhaps that does make that calling a little, the 10 years or more, a little more economically less painful.
Yeah.
So, so how'd you do in law school?
So I did well. Yeah, I was a good student. I'd hit my stride.
Define well.
I was an A student, there.
You don't have to look down. There's no shame in that.
So I don't.
You did
I'm not used to talking about this. It's been a lot of time since someone's asked me about my grades in law school. But once I hit my stride in the latter part of college, I realized that this was an opportunity I'd been given, and I needed to put my shoulder into it a little bit.
Well, I like to ask about grades, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of, at least my interest, so I make assumptions about the audience interests, is grades aren't everything. All right, or at least that's what I always told my parents. But it is a reflection of discipline and focus, and really a maturity at a young age that not all of us had. And so the reason I ask is because I want to understand, was this like focus, was this discipline, was this seriousness of what you're doing at the time? Was that something that you've always had? Was it something that clicked on at a moment in life, which for you might have been your spring sophomore, college? And everyone's answer is different. Some people are like, no, I was always, some are like, I was never a good student. And you're like, how did you become so disciplined in what you do today? It's like something changed down the road for you, perhaps at UC Riverside, Irvine, excuse me, Irvine, your sophomore year. So that's why I asked.
Yeah. No, that's what it is. I mean, it was a moment I remember when it clicked in college. And then when I really liked law school. I mean, I loved reading the cases and arguing and staying up till 2 a.m. in the study group arguing, the complexity of the judge's ruling. And I had this incredible professor, Larry Kramer, who actually went on to be dean of Stanford Law School. I had him as a first year in our kind of homeroom section, and he was famous for really making students, not necessarily cry, but really coming down on them with Socratic method. And that's where I really learned how to think, was in that class. And so I loved law school and kind of threw myself in, and it didn't seem like, even though it was long hours, it didn't seem like, again, drudgery or hard work.
That's great. You graduate law school, you do well, and you go back to the White House?
I didn't at that point. No, I wanted to.
Because it was 97. Clinton was still in there.
Clinton was still there, but I was focused on building a private sector career. Okay. I went to a big law firm, Melvin and Myers.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Big national firm. Yeah. And I went there for 2 reasons. Coming out of NYU Law School with decent grades, you had a lot of opportunities and lots of job offers. Economy was booming. But I went there because Warren Christopher, who'd been Secretary of State for Bill Clinton and run his transition, was the partner there, in LA based, actually the building next door here in Century City. And first I went to the San Francisco office and was there a year and a half, and then I came down to Century City.
Did you know you always want to come back out west?
I had a sense that, I didn't always know, but after living 5 years in the East Coast with winters, 5 years of winters, I knew I wanted to come back
summers in D.C.
And summers, yes.
I spent a summer in D.C. It's hot.
It's hot. It's hot and humid.
Especially when you're wearing a suit.
Yes, that's true. And so I came to Melvin to work for Christopher, and he really is the model that I followed in my career, which he had built this incredible law firm, and it was kind of world renowned. He was a very serious attorney, a counselor to presidents and CEOs, but he'd always spent a certain amount of his time doing public service as well as his way of giving back. And either that was full-time as Secretary of State or Deputy Secretary of State or running the transition, or it was advising governments on other issues. And I said, what a wonderful model. Here's someone who built a serious career, who was, made some money and security for his family, as something to be proud of, but also gave back in a public way. And so I kind of modeled my career.
So you could kind of keep a foot in both worlds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so but he was a mentor of mine and someone I just looked up to. And so I really try to model my career after. I'm not saying I'm anything like him. He was, again, Secretary of State, but it was a lot.
Well, hey, give it time.
Yeah.
You're still
Maybe
young.
A lot of time.
You're still young. How long were you there?
I was there for about 3 years, and I intended to stay longer. I thought I would be a partner and I would go that route, but I worked on a acquisition for Warner Brothers.
That's how it happens.
That's how it happens.
They say, hey, this guy's pretty good, and they take you.
I worked out an acquisition for Warner Brothers. It went well, and a lot of 2 a.m., 3 a.m. nights and got to know some of the team over there, and they came to the firm at the end of that and said, hey, can we borrow Sean for 3 months? We're launching a new division that's going to create content for the internet. And, we need a lawyer to help us with these deals. Can we borrow him? And, we'll pay the his full hourly fee to the firm. And so they did that. I went over there, and about a month into it, they realized they were paying the firm a whole lot more.
It would be
than
cheaper
they could pay
just to
me.
hire them.
And so I said yes to that. But my caveat, I said, look, I want to do half business, half legal, because I knew I liked the business side. And within about 2 months, I was able to hire a couple lawyers to work for me and became all business, and then spent almost 5 years working in kind of business development, corporate venture capital, investing there. And that's where I made the transition from lawyer to investor.
I want to go back to O'Melveny Myers real quick, and then into Warner Brothers. We've established clearly very hard worker. What was your life like when you were an attorney? What was your schedule like? It
was long days.
Define that.
I mean, routine. If I was working on a deal, I wouldn't go home till 1 or 2 in the morning. You didn't really have a lot of remote work then. That really wasn't done, right? You worked in the hours. I'd be so tired sometimes I would fall asleep at the traffic light at 1 in the morning in my car. And you worked at least one weekend day, if not both, because when you're working on a deal, but you kind of don't know any better. You're not missing it because. You have friends and you have dinners, and it's not like you have a bad life. And you have a bunch of friends at the office, and you develop a whole. I'm still friends with people.
Still take a couple vacations a year, but
exactly. Yeah,
but day to day, it's a grind.
Yeah, it's a grind, but you're also it's exciting because you're learning at an exponential pace because you're doing so much work, and I think the smartest people. I work with very smart people here at Cityview, but the sheer intellectual capability of everybody in that law firm was great, and everybody was challenging all the time, and so it was very invigorating. And I would have stayed longer. I didn't intend to leave had this opportunity not come up to jump to the business side.
Timing wise, you and your wife, you get married when?
We got married. Well, it was right then in '98, so about a year after law school.
And when did the baby carriage come?
Baby carriage came about in 2000. Yeah, in June of 2000 is when my son was born. So
you're at Warner Bros.
Yeah, I was a few months into Warner Brothers at that point. Yeah.
What was Warner Bros. Like? I mean, you talked about what you worked, but
Warner Brothers was great. I mean, again, I'm an optimist, so I feel like I see the best in everything. But look, I had an office on the lot. Right, at Warner Brothers. Yeah. I would go to the gym at lunchtime, and no joke, you would have Rob Lowe running on the treadmill on one side and Jennifer Aniston on the other because they were shooting West Wing and Friends. Yeah. The work was really interesting. I was doing kind of new media and technology, which was a very exciting time as they were going through business model changes. I was traveling a ton. I had someone to work for me in Tokyo. I had someone to work for me in London.
Your O'Melveny buddies were probably so jealous. They were so jealous. Man, this guy gets to work on the lot. He's next to Jennifer Aniston. Like, what are we doing?
Exactly. How I rubbed it in too.
Oh no, for sure. I was going to say your social credit score was way high. Like they were like, man, you were probably they were trying to hang with you. Yeah. Like, hey, can I come visit at the office?
Exactly.
That's funny. So, what was the if any, what was the change? You talk about the 1 a.m.s at, the law firm O'Melveny, but how did, if any, in terms of your work life,
So I would say that the hours were not quite as long. They were still long. They weren't quite as long as being a lawyer. But I had to develop a whole new set of skills, right? I had to learn Excel. I had to learn PowerPoint. I had to... the person who ran my division when I first worked there had come from McKinsey and Company, so I had to learn the McKinsey method of doing strategic analysis, which was super interesting and useful. And then I had to go in and build relationships with different division heads who didn't necessarily value the relationship of corporate coming in and asking a lot of questions. So I had to learn a lot of social skills and how to get someone on your side and realize you could be a benefit to their business as opposed to a problem. So it was just a whole different set of skills, but really, really interesting and dynamic.
And so you were there 4 years and...
Almost 5, yeah.
And then how do you get into real estate?
So it's, the one thing that I didn't like about Warner Bros., I just didn't like entertainment. That was a problem. I didn't have that passion. So at the end of the day, I remember I worked really hard for a year, and I put together a deal with NTT Docomo in Tokyo to put Looney Tunes characters on cell phones. And it was a big deal, and it was cover of Variety, and everybody was in it. They gave me a nice bonus. Right. And I was like, is this what I'm doing with my life? It just wasn't passion. And I
10 years before, you were changing the world in healthcare.
I was changing, exactly, right? And so
now you sold out.
Yeah, and so I remember I was doing a fundraiser for somebody running for mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, eventually became mayor, and I had invited the general counsel of Warner Brothers, who was politically active. I remember him calling me in, and he sat me down, and he said, "What are you doing? And why are you doing this?" And I said, "Why? It's all my free time." He said, "No, I'm not." He said, "I'm not saying you can't do it." He said, "But you should be out like whining and dining writers and directors. Like, why are you wasting your time with this local politics stuff?" And I realized in that moment that I had this passion for cities and changing people's lives. I didn't love being in a huge bureaucracy, right? No one ever left Warner Brothers, because if you stay there, you make a bunch of money, and it's very comfortable for 25 or 30 years, and the perks are great. But I thought, ever going to truly build wealth. I wasn't going to get to build anything. And so I made the decision I was going to jump into real estate, which I love, because it's a great intersection of business and finance and community and politics. And it's kind of all the things I loved wrapped into one. And, Cityview was being formed, and it was a really interesting thesis to me, which was a change on what was happening in residential real estate at the time. At the time, the dominant thinking for housing was, let's go buy land off the next freeway off-ramp, let's run some utilities out there and build homes, and people will move there. And the Cityview's thesis was there's going to be a generation of people who wanted to live more in cities, more near culture and nightlife.
And that was a newer concept at that time. Yeah, that was a newer
concept.
That was against the grain.
Right, and it was called infill housing at the time, and a lot of the big institutional players stayed away from it because it was much more complicated than just going and buying raw land and designing your 3 housing types and building 300 of them. And I thought, what a great opportunity, but it was a big change, because I took a 50% pay cut. I left my great corner office on the Warner Brothers lot to take a cubicle in Santa Monica at a little we were wedged in with a little boutique investment bank. There were 3 of us. And it was a risk, but I was really excited.
You lost all your celebrity friends.
Lost all my celebrity friends.
Which is
if I got to be honest, I never really had celebrity friends. but everybody thought I lost my celebrity friends.
Did you? Sorry, last question about your entertainment. I'll tie it together.
Much more interesting than real estate, right?
No. So, as part of Warner Bros., did you get to go to like the premieres and the after parties, things like that?
Once in a while, yeah. If I was working, like I worked on a lot of the Matrix. Right. Licensing and that kind of thing, so I got to go to some of those.
Because if so, we might have been at some parties together.
Interesting. Okay, so, I knew you looked familiar.
It's no. So I was playing football at USC, and there's alumni who hooked us up with an internship at MGM, and my job was to seat people at the premieres at the Garamans Theater, and that's all I had to do. Is like, okay, I think you're sitting here, Mr. and Mrs. Famous person, and then I get to go to the after parties. Yeah, that was super cool. That was my entertainment experience.
It was pretty interesting times.
Yeah, it was. No, it was fun. But yeah, it was a different business for sure. But okay, so you take this leap. You explain why. You explain the motivations. And you have 2 young kids now.
I have 2 young kids.
Is your wife working?
My wife had just gone back to work, as a deputy city attorney prosecuting slumlords. Yeah, that was her public interest.
Oh, all right. Well, and so you weren't going to be a slumlord, right?
No,
because here's why. Because you're going to be back having to battle.
Exactly.
And
yes.
And she's
I knew she was going to win.
Yeah, she's going to win. That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
But so.
Yeah. But it was a big risk.
That's what I'm touching on. Is you're taking this. You're leaving. You're not the first person. I mean, you have a very incredible job you had, but the idea of leaving a cushy, comfortable, that a lot of people, that is the outcome they want. Is like again, like you said, no one leaves Warner Brothers, but to take this 50% pay cut, not even the money, the risk, right? The risk of being an entrepreneur, being a founder, starting something, all the while you have littles at home, which is it's hard to pull at 1 a.m.s when you got commitments at home, Walk me through what's going through your head right there.
Well, and I'll add a wrinkle to it. That September 11th had just happened.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was angry and concerned about that. And obviously my father had served. So I joined the Navy Reserves as an intelligence officer. And I went through all of my intelligence training and actually started my reserve duty the weekend before I started at Cityview. So I added that on top of everything else to try to do my public service part. And
so that's what is it? Once every 4 weeks, you're gone for the weekend?
You're gone for a weekend and then basically 17 days a year separately, which ends up being most of your vacation time is spent on active duty somewhere around the world. So I would be in Hawaii, I would be in Dam Neck, Virginia, I would be...
And how much of a conversation did you have with your wife before you did this?
We had a number of conversations.
Okay, all right.
And I would say I actually wanted to join full time. I said I want to join and deploy, and she said, we have at the time she said we have a 14-month-old. I'm pregnant with the second one. I'll support you if you do it, but you really think this through. And so I ultimately decided this reserve program was critical because they didn't have enough intelligence officers, and the military had created this program, and you could do real work. You weren't just training, you were actually, once they trained you, you were actually doing real intelligence work, and that was being pushed forward to what they call the war fighters, the people in Iraq and Afghanistan and Horn of Africa and different locales. And so I said, okay, this is a way I can contribute in the kind of Warren Christopher model and still be here for my family and be here for my private sector career. So that was the balance I tried to create.
And how many years did you do this?
8 years.
Wow.
8 years, yeah. I did. I was with the Defense Intelligence Agency for 4 years, and I was with Pacific Fleet for 4 years.
Man, well, thank you for that. And you need to run for office or something, all right?
I know too much to run for office.
Yeah, or they know too much about you.
After this podcast,
When's the next mayor? Oh, you just had a mayor race in L.A., right?
Yeah.
All right, well, next mayor race.
Yeah.
Next presidential race, all right? Burton for president. So talk to me about the early days of Cityview.
Yeah, so it was great. I mean, we had a small separate account that an institutional investor gave us, and it was non-discretionary, so we had to get every deal approved by then.
Hold on, time out for the audience. That's not common because you I say this with all love and affection in the world. You don't have a track record yet, right? And so how did that happen?
Yeah, there was one of the founders and partners of the firm had been a home builder, had built a lot of housing in California, and we had a former elected official there, and so there was some DNA of people that had been accomplished things, and at the time, this institutional investor wanted to invest more in California. It was what they called the double bottom line theory of, let's get market rate returns, but it's also build more housing because that's something that's desperately needed. And I mean, I frankly wish we were that innovative today at a state level, and we're not. But I wish we were. And so it was in those lines that they said, okay, you seem to know what you're doing. We like you, but but we're not going to totally trust you. You have to show us every deal. We have to approve it. But if you do what you say we can do, we'll funnel a lot of capital to you. And so, and I was the youngest on the team by maybe 15 or 20 years. And so my job was to really do deals. Like I was doing business development and acquisitions, and also because I was a lawyer, I could do a lot of the legal work, and it could be kind of really a jack of all trades, and was willing to really hustle and work hard. And that, $40 million turned into $100 million, turned into $200 million, and eventually we grew this account to almost $700 million of equity doing housing in California.
Talk to me about your first project.
First project was in Santa Maria, California. It was a
beautiful little spot, but sleepy little coastal community. Yeah.
And it was at the time we weren't vertically integrated because there's only a few of us, so we would partner with builders and really be their equity source. And it was a small lot subdivision we decided that basically everybody was building 5,000 square foot lots. We said, what can we build on 3,000 square foot lots and get more density, keep the cost down? And I think it was 149 units was our
Which
first
is big
project.
for Santa Maria.
Yeah.
But getting back to
supply constrained market.
Supply constrained, but infill urban, that's not that.
Well, it was there actually. I mean,
Really?
it was kind of in the heart of Santa Maria,
Got
and
it.
it was
Okay.
surrounded by all the businesses and other things.
Kind of like
And
Maine and Maine.
the second deal was in Inglewood that we
Yeah.
did, which was infill. And then we started doing deals in LA and other places. It was hard to do the first deal in LA because we didn't have a track record. Nobody knew us. So we had to find someone who'd kind of trust us to be their partner. And then we grew from there, and we grew to the Bay Area, and then we grew to Pacific Northwest, and we grew to Denver, and we grew to Texas. And so we really grew over the next few years, doing these kind of more urban projects. But it was really as an allocator. At the time, we weren't vertically integrated, and we were just partnering with builders and developers.
Well, I tell you, grow to Nashville, but not right now. We got so many units coming online that rents are falling. I gave a talk out here in LA a month ago, and they started talking about the housing affordability. I was like, guys, let me tell you, it's not a affordability issue; it's a supply issue.
Yeah.
So if you figure that out, you watch rents come down. I see it in Nashville, but
it's amazing how many people don't understand how supply is really the driver of this.
I know, but the anti-development lobby is very effective
Very
at
strong.
messaging.
Yeah.
They're very good at messaging. So I'm going to ask you two questions. The same concept is, talk to me about, especially early in the Cityview days, starting with, was there ever a moment, or what was the toughest moment where you really questioned, like, I don't know if this is going to work?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to ask you the opposite. Tell me or talk about the moment where where you said, you know what, I think I'm going to be okay. I think we're really going to find success here.
Yeah, so I would say it wasn't the early years. The early years, we were going like gangbusters. I couldn't
GFC.
be more excited. It was a great financial crisis, right? The great financial crisis hit.
Brutal.
We were in the teeth of it, doing housing in California-based. And our biggest investor, which was the vast majority of the fees and revenue of the firm, made a decision to get out of the housing business. And it was an existential crisis for the firm. And I remember going home when the kids were young, but going home and doing the bedtime routine with my wife. And after dinner, I poured her a glass of scotch. And she said, I don't drink scotch. And I said, tonight you need to drink scotch. We need to have a talk about what we're facing right here. And I laid out for her the challenges, and this could be it, right? I didn't know if we could survive this because they had the ability to pull the plug. And, my wife gets a lot of credit for a lot of things, but she said, let's make a list of everything that's important to us, right? And so we sat down and we wrote down everything, and we looked, and it was the kids and our family and our health and all these other things. And she said, how many of these require us to be rich, right? They don't, right? We need to have enough to make it by. She said, but, I can work, and you can work, and you have your law degree. And the other thing that she said is, you'll figure this out. You always do. She said, look at your background. Just where's the opportunity here, And so it really made me think. And so I walked into my, partners the next day, and I said, what about if we go buy all the assets, all 29 of them, from our investor? And they said, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. Where are we going to come up with that? And they'll never go for it. And I said, let's try. So they want to get out of the business. Yeah, it's a recap, right? And it's by this is 2009 pricing. So
I was going to say, not that you asked them, but when they say, hey, I want to be bought out, it's 2009 pricing. They're, as a real estate person, there's this still a massive, I don't want to say gamble, but leap of faith you're taking. But yeah, that's in hindsight, that was a very good decision.
So so I had to fly up and meet with this investor, and we thought they should stay in the asset, and I made the honest case to them that they should stay in, and if they invested a few $100 million more, we could get them out of this in one piece, because there were still great assets and great locations. And they said, are you crazy? We have no desire. We want to get out of this business. And I said, well, if that's the case, let us buy you out at your values. And they said, you have the capital? And we were like, of course we have the capital. And so I got on the plane on the way home, and I
said, okay, now we
called home, and I said, hey, we got to raise the capital. And we were pretty confident based on this that we could make it happen, although we'd never done anything like this. And that's where our relationship started with, Blackstone. They became our first kind of, non-pension fund insurance company investor, and they were wonderful to work with. We bought 29 assets in 12 states, and they did it.
Great assets and great markets at a great time to buy.
Yeah, and they've been, they were a phenomenal partner, and we ended up, the investor was thrilled because we did exactly what we said we were going to do, which is pay them. There was no retrade, there was no renegotiation. They were able to take that money and redeploy it for their priorities, and that launched a great, partnership we've had with Blackstone and with John Gray and his team, and they were very good to us, very smart, and And we've done a number of other, I don't know, another 25 deals with them since then.
They just did a big deal in multifamily.
They did.
Yeah, big one.
Did. Yeah. And I think people should pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Nobody knows the market better than they do.
You know, listen, it's like, paying attention. I think Jonathan Gray said the other day, he said, you know, what is it today? June 5th? All right. I think this was a month or two ago when that deal got announced. He said, look, I'm not saying we're at the bottom, but I think we're pretty risk protected that if we're not at it, we're close to it.
Yeah.
And so you know, I wish more capital, you know, followed their lead, because, you know, it's like it's time to come back in.
And it's interesting, you know, and he said something else as well, which is that Blackstone's not going to wait for the all clear signal to start buying, because they realize that the best opportunities are going to happen before all the capital rushes back in, right? And so I think that that's a model that we try to follow at Cityview as well. I mean, you obviously be very prudent and careful, and you know, and pick the right projects in the right markets, but you don't just want to follow the herd mentality.
So you talk about recapping this partner at 2009, Blackstone coming in, and you guys, you know, my words, hitting a home run on that. And so congrats, that's awesome. And obviously that's led to continued success. What does the future look like for you and for Cityview? Like what are you working on now, and how if any iteration or changes to the business plan have taken place?
We're pretty bullish on the future.
Yeah.
I mean, we grew 5x or so coming out of the great financial crisis. We grew another 3x coming out of COVID. We just closed our latest commingled fund at the end of last year and have discretionary capital. And we really have three strategies that we're focused on in our markets. One is we are recapping partners where, for their own reasons, they want to get out of an asset. Our first intent is always to stick with our existing partners, but sometimes they'll have other concerns, liquidity issues, or other things. And they'll say,
there's different motivation. Not unaligned interests. It just interests can diverge over time just because of different business strategies, investment strategies, hold periods, all of that.
Exactly, right? Sometimes it's the last deal in a fund for somebody. Sometimes they need cash for a loan elsewhere. So we're doing that, where it makes sense from an investment standpoint. And then we have a running game and a passing game. And the running game is buying existing assets at a deep discount to replacement cost. We really like that. We have a deal we're closing on in a week or so. It's the first value add deal I've done in 2 years, to give you a sense of. Yeah. Even though we underwrote 103 last year, we didn't close any. But this is a deal in Northern California.
Must have been those Matthews guys driving up the price.
So I think
you hear that plug, Zach?
Exactly.
Anyway.
This is a deal, for example, that is 2011 vintage, great market in Northern California, one market that's really benefited from the dispersion of people from COVID and work from home, 98% occupied, and we're buying it at 45% less than we could build that project today.
So it's a general statement. It doesn't mean it's always true, but when you're that below replacement cost, you're typically well protected.
Yeah. I mean, it would just, if you believe that the Bay Area will come back over time, which we do.
I do.
Then we're doing deals like that. We got a second deal under contract here in LA. We got a third deal and a fourth deal we're in best and final on. Again, there's lots of deals we're saying no to, but where we can buy at this deep discount in a supply constraint market we believe in. And this is not stuff from 1978. This is stuff that's built in the last 10 years, 15 years. So that's our running game. And our passing game, we're really excited about as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we do a ton of development at a firm, but we're not actively developing a lot now because it just hasn't made sense when you can buy at this discount to replacement cost to build something new. That being said, there are these great markets like Denver and San Diego, and we have a project in Thousand Oaks here in the greater LA area, and one up in Walnut Creek, right on the BART line, where we're going to need new housing going forward. So in those deals, we option the land, we take it through an entitlement process, and there's some really great state laws that have been passed recently that allow you to increase density, reduce parking, basically create a lot more value in the land. And then we will buy that land once it's fully entitled and we're ready to put a shovel in the ground. And so right now there's probably 3,000 units in our pipeline that we own or control that will be ready to go vertical on in 25 or 26. at what we think is going to be really attractive pricing. So
That's
that's what we're excited
And
about.
then you just got to keep the sequel lawsuits at bay.
Yeah, exactly. So we got to keep the secret. But we work, having spent so much time doing entitlements, we really work early on with elected officials in communities. So we want to be the white hat developer who's, listening to a community. We can't always do everything every single person wants, but we can build stuff that's a benefit. And that's how we have approached development, and we've been fortunate, kind of knock on wood so far, to be successful.
Yeah, it's when you approach the community not as zero sum. It's either you're going to win or I'm going to. There's a way where we can meet in the middle, and through that we both win.
Yeah.
So, all right. So busy, staying active. I know you said offense, but now buying. You said the first deal in 2 years, first value add deal in 2 years. You have this development pipeline, so staying busy.
Staying busy, yeah. And look, we have 50 plus assets that we own and manage as well. So I didn't talk about asset management. That's obviously been a huge focus, particularly in the last couple of years. Interest rates have gone up, but they're all in really good supply constrained locations.
That was going to ask because I touched on Nashville, but the markets you've mentioned tend to be, because of regulation and the difficulties. Like you said, it's a high barrier of entry to develop.
Right.
But the good news of high barriers is if you can get over it, there's less people on the other side, right?
Right.
And so that's one of the things we've seen is we've actually still seen some rent growth in some of these more supply constrained markets.
Yeah.
It's just how do you build the unit? So
I'm really glad you make that point, because I think all too often as I'm in New York talking to investors and those kinds of things, they'll say, well, look, rents are going down. There's a ton of new supply coming online, because they've read a national story.
Sure.
And real estate is not a national business. It's a local business. I don't have to tell you that. And the markets that we're in, I mean, look at LA, for example, right? LA gets a lot of bad press for how difficult it is to build here and regulations, et cetera. That being said, the rule of thumb is you generally want to deliver about 3% of your unit stock every year to make up for population growth and job growth and obsolescence of existing units, right? LA over the next 5 years is set to deliver 0.6%. So 1/5 of what it needs to. That's just to keep equilibrium. So, that shows you that if you can get things done in this market, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to drive value for your investors.
And just keep an eye on job creation or loss and population creation or loss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Look,
because that's the demand component.
Right. Yeah. And look, California and LA had negative population during COVID, but last year was back to positive again.
It was?
By 300,000 or 400,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, with the latest census numbers, and that should continue.
I saw I can't remember where I saw this, but it was LA, San Francisco, New York, Chicago there was some population loss, and maybe it was over the last 5 years, but
yeah, particularly during COVID, I think you saw a lot of people leave. But
reshuffling.
But still, when you look at the educational institutions we have here, you look at the industries that we have here, you look
the weather, not the traffic,
not the traffic.
No.
Although go to Austin, you want to see traffic, right?
Yeah,
go to
Austin
Houston
traffic
if you want to see
or
traffic.
Atlanta.
Atlanta if you want to
Chicago.
see traffic. Yeah.
Nashville.
Exactly. Yeah, Nashville too. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's too many people in Nashville. You guys, Californians need to stop moving there. No. Look, you've done a lot, and your story is remarkable. It's complex. Like, there's so much to cover. I could talk for another hour and a half with you. But well, if you could, to the best of your abilities, summarize, like, what, in your humble opinion, are the reasons you've been able to accomplish and achieve all the things you've done? And I know that's not your personality to talk about yourself, but hey, you're on the show, dog. That's how it goes.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
So I'd say a couple things. One is I do think I've had real fortune and luck at the right places in my life. Like, had a family not taken me in when I was 16, had the dean not taken an interest in me, had I not worked on a deal for Warner Brothers and gotten to know the people, I wouldn't have had the opportunities I had. So I do think I've been fortunate and lucky. I've also, frankly, had a wife who stood behind me through long hours and difficult times, and been incredibly supportive. And that really matters, because when you have that kind of strength at home and behind you. So I've been very lucky. I was taught at a young age, in a variety of the things that I did, that there was no substitute for putting your head down and doing the work. Right? That's something I try to explain to young people often. And I learned this at the White House. I remember somebody telling me, everybody wants your job, nobody wants your work. And if you can do the work, and really put your head down, you will do great strides. The other thing I learned, and I think I first learned this at O'Melveny, is whatever you're working on, you need to attach your pride and integrity to. And pride in the good sense of the word, not the bad sense of the word. So you never do kind of a half-baked job on something. You don't just go through the motions. Like you treat
the good word of pride is caring.
Yeah.
You got to care.
You got to care in a deep way. And I remember somebody told me once that, like, when you're making an argument, you make that argument as if you were arguing with St. Peter at the gates to let you in. Like, that's the passion at which you need to make and how good you have to be. And so I've tried to apply that. And then I think because of my upbringing and things I've dealt with, I've had to be resilient and bounce back from things, because life throws you a lot of curves, right, at the end of the day. And there's no one I know who's been successful who's just had good times all the time and the wind at the back, right? I mean, it's really how you define yourselves and how you define yourself and what you do in those really challenging times, where I think that you make the difference in what you do. And so I'm lucky in that sense too.
I agree with that statement. Is almost anyone who's highly successful, however we define that, has probably faced tremendous adversity and found a way to overcome it. But that's not true about everybody.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask the question. There are a lot of people who face adversity and they don't find the ability ultimately from within, inside, to overcome that. Why do you think that is? They kind of give up.
I think it was the role model, I think, of my father, seeing him push through adversity and the things he went through in his life. I think it's a little bit of my chemistry, to be honest. I mean, I feel lucky in that sense. And it's a little bit of, I don't want to live in a one-bedroom apartment and have to sleep on the couch the way my dad did when I grew up, so I could have the bedroom. And so I have I'm fighting for something there, and I want to make sure my kids, I want to make sure they got good educations and we're safe, and I could provide a home. And I don't need 5 homes, I don't need a private jet, but I want to provide security for them, and I want to provide opportunity for them and give them the opportunities that I didn't have. And so that has been a big driver for me.
But if cap rates go back down to 3, you might have some of those homes in a jet.
Your lips to the Fed's ears. Let's go.
Come on, you got to call Jay Powell and be like, "Yo,
exactly. You'll be my first call if they
Thank
do
you.
that,
I appreciate that. Trust me, I'm rooting for lower rates. But what advice would you have for someone listening who has big goals, has big aspirations, no different than you, whether you're in high school, at NYU Law, in the White House, the law firm, or when you started Cityview? I think a lot of people they go to bed at night, and before they really fall asleep, there's almost this like vision in their head of what they want their life to look like. But some actually go out and achieve it, but a lot don't. What advice would you have for people to say, no, like, go achieve it, and this is my summarized advice on how to do it?
I think it's a couple things. One is it's what was inscribed on the Greek temple, right? Know thyself. And I think it's important to do some introspection and understand what drives you and what you're passionate about. That's really important from my perspective. And it's easier said than done. And by the way, it's easier as you get later in life, like we are, than when you're 20 and you're just trying to get your next job and put food on the table. But I think that's important, because if you're passionate about what you do, you're going to be better at it. You're going to put more time in. You're going to be happier. You're going to be more successful. I think your energy is going to be better. So I think that's important. The other thing is to take some risk. You want it to be smart risk and thoughtful risk, but you're going to get opportunities in your life. I got the opportunity to go to the White House even though it wasn't the most convenient time in my life. I got an opportunity to go to a different law school in a different city and have a very different life experience, even though I was committed somewhere else. And if I hadn't taken those opportunities, I think my life would look very different. And so I think you have to know who you are and what you're passionate about, but then be prepared to take some risk when it comes your way, and bet on yourself, right? I'm always telling young people, bet on yourself, because that's the best bet you can make. Yeah.
And I'd argue that outcome is the one you can control the most, right? Because you're effectively...
Or die trying.
Or die on your shield. I didn't even touch on You're president of the board of airport commissioners.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So so I always, said I was always doing one big civic thing,
Yeah.
right at the end of the day. So that was when I served in the Navy for my 8 years. That was, I was on the city planning commission for 4 years here, which was really valuable. But then when our last mayor was elected, he asked me to chair the airport authority here in Los Angeles. And he had said to me, look, we haven't really modernized LAX. It's a huge opportunity. It's a nightmare to get in and out of. I want you to bring all of your skills and real estate and development and working with communities and all that energy and help really remake the airport. So I chaired that board.
And that led to, help me out here. Was it like a $6 billion?
$20 billion.
Well, knowing
that wasn't just inflation.
Knowing California, it probably
exactly.
started at 6.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. But all right, $20 billion.
And it's almost done. We're building the train system's built and will open next year. Bringing public transit to the airport, largest rental car facility in the world, a new terminal, remaking all the other terminals, each which is the size of its own mid-size airport. And so we really worked to modernize that. And it was really, really interesting, intense. I had to develop a lot of new skills. I'd never done a press conference before. I'd never, managed an infrastructure asset that before. But it was really, really interesting. And then an opportunity to go on the national authority in Washington, which is the two major national airports there, Washington Reagan and Dulles, and that I had to go through a Senate confirmation for that.
How was that?
Presidential appointee. It was 15 intense months to go through, and I wasn't even controversial.
No, I was going to say, come on, nobody cares. Airport
I was unanimous
commissioner
ultimately, but it took.
Well, there you go, a little bipartisan love. Come on,
bipartisan love.
That's what I'm telling you. You got to run for office. Like you're going to win.
I know too much. That's it.
You know what you know too much. You know how brutal that life is.
Yeah, it's a tough life. And no, look, I love what we're doing here at Cityview. I'm proud of what we've built. I'm really excited about the future to take advantage of our track record, our knowledge, our skills, our relationships to really lean into what I think is going to be one of the best buying opportunities that I've seen in my career. And I'll continue to always do something major from a civic perspective to give back or a charitable perspective. And look, I'm enjoying, I got one kid in college, one graduated from college. I'm enjoying being an empty nester with my wife. You got
your golf game?
Got working on my golf game, which is fun after putting the clubs down for 2 decades. So no, there's lots of good things to do.
When you were president board airport commissioner nominated by President Joe Biden, he called you. He's like, Sean, I'm the Godfather. I'm gonna call you and ask a favor. Yeah, you're gonna do this favor for me, and one day I'll do a favor for you. How does that even come about? Do you get when you're nominated by a president?
Yeah.
I mean, are you actually the president's calls you and I'm nominating you, or is it just somebody in the
president did not call me. No, I got a call from. I wish I could tell you he did.
Small potatoes.
I got a call from the White House, and they asked me if I would serve in this capacity, and I wasn't sure at first because it was a pretty big commitment, but I ultimately agreed to do it because it's hard to say no. And then they spent about 6 months vetting you.
You've been vetted so many times. You're good.
It was quite an intense. But they went back and read my law review articles that I wrote in 1996.
Well, the good news, I never wrote any articles, so hey, good luck vetting me.
I literally said to them, I said, "Are you putting me on the court? Is there something I need to know?" Because I didn't talk to my wife about that. But anyway, it was an honor, and I served, and I actually just finished my 2-year term.
So wait, what's the next civic thing for you?
I don't know yet.
He'll present himself?
Yeah, I don't know yet. Yeah, I've never been a person who's had a 25-year plan. Yeah. My goal has always been to point myself in the right direction and see what happens. Well,
come on, this is a Matthews podcast. We got a big audience now. Let's make an announcement.
Yeah, apparently.
Burton, what is it? Burton 2028.
Definitely not doing that.
Well, let's go.
I will say this though, that I'm so excited, frankly, about the business and buying opportunity in our industry that I'm just excited to lean in and focus on that for the next couple of years. And the next opportunity I have to serve in a civic capacity, I'll take it.
That's cool. Well, I'm right there with you on, I'm not obviously on the buying side, more brokerage, but it's all tied together. And, I don't want to see the economy contract or a recession, but I would like to see if it is a cooling, something to bring the inflation back closer to where they want it so that we can get a couple rate cuts in here and come on, make us look good again.
Yeah. Yeah, we need a couple rate cuts. I'm fingers crossed for September. Unlikely, but there's a
I know.
chance.
Well, I've seen. I'm not getting the weeds, but I've seen over the last 2-3 weeks. There's been some pretty serious consumer spending reports come out that show some significant cooling finally, or a pullback on the consumer spending, which is I think where it has to happen. So we've seen treasuries go down 30 basis points in the last 2 weeks. So
Look, it's consumer spending is what 75% of
Yeah.
GDP, and you've seen manufacturing slow, and I think you've seen the number of job openings decrease quite a bit.
Jolts is the lowest it was since I think they said June 21.
Yeah. So I think we all need a little bit of a slowdown there, so the Fed can start to lower rates again and get to a more neutral rate, and that'll be good for all of us. I think it'll be good for the country. I think it'll be good for real estate. So we're looking forward to that.
I hear you. Amen to that. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Before we wrap up, I always ask the question: is there a resource, class, a book, something that you would give advice to the audience that really helped you in your career that you recommend they do or read or?
So I could answer that, and we could do a whole nother podcast on that. But just to give you one thing, just for kind of especially younger people, there's a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen, which is a system for organization and like execution. Right? It's not strategy. It's not high-minded. You're not going to learn about economics. It's about how do you actually achieve things and accomplish things, and it's a great system. And when I was a young executive at Warner Brothers and I was overwhelmed with what I had, I went to Barnes & Noble. And for your listeners, there was a bookstore that used to exist, and you could go in person.
Barnes & Noble.
They don't have any more in here in Los Angeles, and I was
thank you, Amazon.
and I was scrolling in the productivity business area, and I came across this book, and I read that system, and I implemented it, and I have everybody at the company implement it, and it's not high-minded. It's just very, very practical on how you get from A to B on things, and it's really useful. So,
my last question.
I will have one more. Sorry.
Yeah,
please.
Please.
You, but
yes,
there's a book I just read called The Age of AI, and it's by Eric Schmidt from Google and Henry Kissinger. It was the last book he wrote before he passed away, and it's a wonderful book written not by engineers, but by lay people who can describe what AI is, but really the opportunities that exist there and how it'll affect business, but also politics and society and other things. And it's very accessible, but also very thoughtful. And so from a timely perspective, I found it really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna get that because we're building a new system and just interlacing the entire thing with AI. And I think it's a responsibility for anyone, but it's obviously executive, not to make what we do sound more important, but it's understanding the efficiency and opportunity it creates in your business, but also the risk.
Right. Right.
So I'm going to get that. The age of AI, and then also getting things done. All right. Last thing. I want a professional, personal. Professional, a do and a don't. Do this, don't do that. And a personal, do this, don't do that. In your humble opinion.
Professional, do this, I would say show up for work every day.
That's a good person. Yeah. Hey.
I don't know if that dates me, but
Preach.
I would say that we've been full-time in the office.
I love it. I walked in here and, I was like, everyone's here.
We've been here since the day California allowed us to come back, and I think it's a secret to our success.
Yeah. When did they let you come back? A couple weeks ago?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're the last state in the country, so that gives you a sense.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what about a don't? Don't stay at home?
Yeah, I would say don't read your own press releases. And what I mean by that is don't get too big for your britches and be too prideful. Right? None of us are that important in the scheme of things. And I always try to tell people, check your ego at the door and let's just get the work done. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say.
And on personal side?
Yeah. Personal side, I'd say find the right spouse, because it all comes from there, right? A happy marriage leads to, I believe, a happy life, and you have a great base to do whatever you want to do. And I would say don't ever drink during the day. That's what I would say.
Yeah?
Yeah. No day drinking.
No day drinking.
No day drinking. Yeah.
Well,
maybe if you're in, maybe if you're in Hawaii on vacation.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I'm not a big drinker, but if I am drinking, I'm on vacation, and I actually say I'll day drink, and I have a rule: when the sun goes down, the drinks go down.
It's like, interesting.
Because you get a good night's sleep.
Yeah,
like you have
that's true,
time,
yeah.
you eat a good dinner, you drink lots of water,
Yeah,
depending on how many pina coladas by the pool, right? So,
Yeah,
but no.
I would say that I would say the don't in a more seriousness is, and it's gonna be a double negative. Don't exercise.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people I know say I don't have time, but there's no way that I could function, which as busy as I am, at the level that I need to be, the energy I have, if I wasn't exercising 6 days a week. So, like, don't let yourself go. Take it seriously.
Couldn't agree with you more. Now, were you exercising back when you were putting in those savage hours of till 1 a.m. and all that?
Less than I do now, but I mean, I never didn't exercise or run or do something. Okay. I mean, I always found a way. Look, you just got to make it a priority, even if it's 20 minutes a day when you're working those hours, but you can't let yourself go.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I was one of those guys who did the don't, and from 20 to about 35, so I was like, oh, I'm working, and I got the kids, and knowing what I know now, all it took was like put some shoes on, go for a run. Because I looked at a workout like it's like this 2-hour commitment at a gym, but I agree.
I changed my mindset on it, where I instead of thinking, oh, I got to drag myself to the gym and I got to do this, I changed my mindset to I'm giving myself something for an hour. I'm doing myself a favor. I'm doing something that benefits me. And once I changed my mindset, then all of a sudden I started to look forward to it. So,
well, I agree.
This has been great.
No, Sean, I can't thank you enough. This was awesome. And thanks for hosting us here. It's a beautiful office. Everyone's in the office, dressed professionally, getting after it for all those listeners. All right, get back in the office. No work from home.
Well, congratulations on your success. If you ever decide not to be a real estate mogul and be a full-time media personality, you'd be good at it.
No, that's not my calling. I do this because I enjoy it. I really actually do. I enjoy it.
Comes across. You enjoy it.
And I get to meet people that I'm sure we would have met. Maybe we have met, but like now I feel like I do know you, and so that's really cool.
We did meet. We had dinner for an hour. You don't remember that?
Yeah. Well, I was day drinking. No, I'm just joking. All right, Sean. I'll see you. Thank you so much.
This has been great. Thanks a lot.